Hey guys. Tonight we explore the most extraordinary thing about the Norse gods, together, as we begin with something that sets them apart from almost every other pantheon in human history. The Greek gods were immortal and knew it. The Egyptian gods were eternal and timeless. But the Norse gods knew exactly how they were going to die. They had been told. The prophecy was clear. And they showed up anyway. Tonight we tell the story of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, and the story of four gods who face their ending with a courage that has no parallel in any mythology I know. Right now, as you're watching this, someone else is watching it too. A different country, a different time zone, a different life, but the same quiet hour. Tonight we explore the story of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, together. If this is your first video here, take a look around. Subscribe if it feels like home, and leave a comment, your location, your time. That small act of saying, "I'm here," does something. It reminds all of us that we're not as alone in this as the dark sometimes makes us feel. Dim the lights. Maybe pull a blanket over yourself if there's one nearby. Let's begin. Before the end, there was Asgard, high above the 9 worlds, connected to the realm of humanity by the Bifrost. The rainbow bridge that burned like fire to those who were not welcome. The gods had built their home. Valhalla stood at the center of it. The great hall of Odin, the Allfather. Its roof was made of golden shields. Its rafters were spears. Half of all the warriors who died in battle were brought there by the Valkyries, the divine warrior women who chose the slain, to feast and fight and feast again, preparing for what was coming. This detail, the preparation, is the most important thing to understand about Norse cosmology before anything else. The gods of Asgard were not naive. They were not living in comfortable denial of the future. They knew with the kind of certainty that prophecy provides, that everything they had built was temporary, that there would come a day, Ragnarok, the doom of the gods, when the enemies they had bound and banished and kept at bay would break free, when the worlds would shake, and the sea would swallow the land and fire would consume the sky, and every god they knew would die. They knew this, and they feasted, and they prepared, and they lived with extraordinary fullness in the time they had. The psychological truth embedded in this cosmology is worth sitting with for a moment. The Norse gods did not have the consolation of immortality. They did not have the comfort of a guaranteed future. They had something rarer and harder, the knowledge of exactly how it was going to end, and the choice of how to spend the time before it did. They chose to spend it well. When Fimbulwinter came, and everything began. The beginning of the end did not announce itself with trumpets. It came as winter, Fimbulwinter, the great winter. The winter that would not end. 3 years of cold without a summer between them. The sun failing to warm the earth adequately, crops failing, animals dying. The bonds that held human society together fraying under the pressure of survival. The ancient Norse who told this story knew winter in a way that most of us do not. Winter was not a season. It was a threat. A real annual possibility of death through cold and starvation. The long dark of the Scandinavian winter, when the sun barely appeared, and the cold was absolute, and the world felt genuinely hostile to human life. Fimbulwinter was that, but without end. And alongside the winter, the other signs began. The wolf skull, who had chased the sun across the sky since the beginning of time, finally caught it. The sun went dark. His brother Hati caught the moon. The stars fell from the sky. The great wolf Fenrir, son of Loki, bound at the beginning of the age by a magical ribbon called Gleipnir, because no chain could hold him, broke free. His mouth opened so wide that his upper jaw scraped the sky, and his lower jaw dragged on the ground. The Midgard serpent Jormungandr, the world serpent, so enormous that he encircled all of Midgard and bit his own tail, released his tail and rose from the ocean. His thrashing caused waves that flooded the land, and Loki himself, the trickster, who had been bound in a cave as punishment for his role in the death of Baldur, broke free. He took command of a ship called Naglfar, a ship made entirely from the fingernails and toenails of the dead, and sailed it toward Asgard with an army of the dead. The ancient enemies were coming. The frost giants, the fire giants of Muspelheim, led by Surtur, whose sword burned brighter than the sun. The forces of chaos and destruction that the gods had held at bay for an age. Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, stood on the Bifrost and blew the Gjallarhorn, the horn whose sound would be heard in all 9 worlds, to call the gods to battle, and the gods came. Let us follow each god individually now, because each of them faced their ending differently, and each of those endings contained something worth understanding. Odin was first, the Allfather, the god of wisdom, of war, of poetry, of death, the god who had sacrificed one eye to drink from the well of wisdom, who had hung himself on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights, wounded by his own spear, to gain the knowledge of the runes. Odin knew what was coming more completely than any other being in the 9 worlds. He had consulted seers and seeresses. He had visited the well of Mimir, the well of memory and wisdom, and paid a price that no other being would pay for its knowledge. He had spent lifetimes accumulating understanding of the fate that awaited him. He knew that at Ragnarok he would face Fenrir, the great wolf, his son in a way, the child of Loki, who had been raised among the gods before his nature became clear. Fenrir, who had grown so large that even the gods feared to feed him, who had been bound by deception, who had suffered the indignity of captivity for an age. Odin knew the wolf would swallow him. He came to that battle anyway. He came carrying his spear Gungnir, which never missed its target. He came with the Einarjar, the warrior dead who had been prepared in Valhalla for exactly this moment. He came with every resource at his disposal, every piece of wisdom he had accumulated across a lifetime of sacrifice. And when Fenrir came for him, Odin fought. The ancient accounts are not triumphant. They do not pretend that Odin won through some last-minute reversal. The wolf swallowed the Allfather. Odin died as the prophecy said he would. But here is the psychological truth of Odin's ending that matters most. He had spent his entire existence in preparation for a moment he could not survive. Not in denial of it, not in desperate attempts to prevent it. In preparation. In the accumulation of wisdom. In the building of Valhalla and the collection of the Einarjar. In the asking of every question that could be asked, all of it oriented toward a moment that would end in his death. The wisdom was real. The preparation was real. The courage was real. And the ending was also real. These things are not contradictory. That is what Odin understood, and what his story asks us to understand. Thor was next. The god of thunder. The protector of humanity. The god whose hammer Mjolnir had guarded Midgard from the giants and monsters that would otherwise have consumed it. The most beloved of the Norse gods among the common people. Not because he was the wisest or the most powerful, but because he was the most straightforwardly on their side. Thor had fought the Midgard serpent before. The two of them were, in a very particular sense, made for each other, The thunder god and the world serpent, the storm and the sea, two enormous forces that had circled each other since the beginning of the age. At Ragnarok, they finally came together completely. Thor killed the Midgard serpent. With 9 blows of Mjolnir 9, the number sacred throughout Norse mythology, he struck the serpent dead. And then he took 9 steps away from the body and fell. Because the serpent's venom, released in the battle, had already done its work, there was no surviving that much poison, no matter how strong the god. Thor died of it. 9 steps. That was all he had left after the serpent was dead. The psychology of Thor's ending is different from Odin's, but equally worth sitting with. Thor did not die having failed. He died having succeeded. The serpent that had threatened the world was dead. The thing he had spent his existence fighting was destroyed. He won the fight that mattered, and the winning killed him. This is a pattern that the Norse tradition seems to understand with unusual clarity. That winning and surviving are different things. That it is possible to accomplish what you came to accomplish, and not be there to see what comes after. Thor took 9 steps, and they were the right 9 steps. Freya's death is perhaps the most psychologically complex of all. Freya was the god of sunshine and fair weather, and fertility and prosperity. A god of peace and plenty, not of war. And yet at Ragnarok, he fought. He faced Surtur, the fire giant whose flaming sword was said to be brighter than the sun, the most powerful being among the enemies of the gods. This was not a fight Freyr could win under any circumstances. But the circumstances were made worse by a choice Freyr had made long before Ragnarok. He had once fallen in love with a giantess named Gerd, and in his desperate wanting of her, he had given away his sword, the magical sword that could fight on its own, that could swing itself through battle without a hand to guide it. He had given it to his servant Skirnir as payment for carrying his message to Gerd. And now, at Ragnarok, facing Surtur and his burning blade, Freyr had only an antler to fight with, because his sword was gone. Given away for love, he fought anyway. He lost. Surtur killed him. The tradition is uncomfortable about this. There is something in the telling of Freyr's death that acknowledges what should not be acknowledged lightly. That the choice he made for love had a cost that extended far beyond what he could have anticipated when he made it. But the tradition also does not condemn him for the choice. He gave away his greatest weapon for something he wanted more than victory, and at the end, when the consequences of that choice arrived in full, he fought with what he had. There is a particular kind of courage in fighting without your best weapon. In showing up to the battle, you cannot win with only an antler, because showing up is what the moment requires regardless of what you're holding. Freyr faced Surtur with an antler. That is not nothing. That is in fact one of the most human things in the entire mythology. The god of justice who understood that justice sometimes costs the one who seeks it. Tyr is the least sung of the 4 gods we are following tonight. But his story carries something that the others do not. Tyr was the god of justice and law, the Norse god whose name gives us our word for Tuesday, and his most famous act before Ragnarok was the binding of Fenrir. When the gods decided that Fenrir had grown too dangerous to remain free, they tricked him into allowing himself to be bound. They told the wolf it was a test of his strength. Could he break this new chain? And Fenrir, suspicious, agreed to be bound only if one of the gods would place their hand in his mouth as a guarantee of good faith. No god was willing to do this, because they knew that when the chain held, and they knew it would hold, because it was magical, made of impossible things, the sound of a cat's footstep, the beard of a woman, The roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird, Fenrir would bite down. No god was willing except Tyr. He placed his hand in Fenrir's mouth. The chain held, and Fenrir bit off Tyr's hand at the wrist. Tyr, the god of justice, had sacrificed his hand to ensure that justice, the binding of something genuinely dangerous, could be accomplished. And he had done it knowing the wolf would bite. The wolf knew too. The bargain was explicitly that the chain would hold and the wolf would bite, and Tyr would lose his hand, and the wolf would be contained. He agreed to the deal. At Ragnarok, Tyr faced Garm, the great hound of hell, the guardian of the realm of the dead. They killed each other. Tyr died, but Garm died too. Tyr understood something that the other gods each understood in their own way, that the cost of doing what needs to be done is sometimes the price of the doing. That justice is not served for free. That the hand you place in the wolf's mouth is the hand you lose, and he placed it anyway. What the Norse tradition knew about endings that other traditions missed, and then it was over. The fire of Surtur consumed the remaining world. The earth sank into the sea, the sky burned. Everything the gods had built, everything they had defended, everything they had feasted in and fought for, gone. And then something unexpected happened. The earth rose again from the sea, new and green, waterfalls running, eagles flying. The fields unseeded and already bearing grain, and some of the gods survived. Not the four we follow tonight. They died as the prophecy said they would. But Odin's sons Vidar and Vali survived. Thor's sons Modi and Magni survived, and they recovered Mjolnir. Baldur, the beloved god whose death had been the beginning of the unraveling, returned from the realm of the dead. And in a field called Idaval, the surviving gods found the golden game pieces that the old gods had played with before everything fell, lying in the grass where they had been dropped, and they sat down and played. This detail, the golden game pieces in the grass, the survivors sitting down to play, is perhaps the most extraordinary thing in the entire Norse mythology. Not the battles, not the individual acts of courage, not even the ending itself. The game pieces, recovered, in the new world. Because what this tells us is something that the Norse tradition understood about endings that almost no other tradition in human history has articulated as clearly. The end is not the end. Not in the sense of denial. Everything did end. Every god we followed tonight died. The world was consumed. The sea swallowed the land and the fire burned the sky. But something continued. Something survived. Something new grew in the place where everything had burned. And the first thing the survivors did was sit down together and play with the things the old gods had loved. What Ragnarok is actually about. I want to stay here for a moment, in the space after the ending, before we move into the quiet. Because the story of Ragnarok is not really a story about gods. It is a story about every person who has ever faced something they could not prevent, something they had been told was coming, something they could not survive, and had to decide what to do with the time before it arrived. The Norse gods chose to feast, to fight, to love and build and prepare and show up fully to the ending when it came. Odin chose wisdom, the relentless accumulation of understanding even knowing it would not save him. Thor chose action, the straightforward, wholehearted fight for the thing he believed in, without calculation of personal survival. Freya chose love, and paid the price that came with that choice, and showed up to the final battle with what he had left. Tyr chose justice, placed his hand in the wolf's mouth knowing it would be bitten off, because the alternative was allowing something dangerous to remain uncontained. 4 different responses to the same impossible situation, and none of them wrong. The question Ragnarok puts to every person who encounters it is not, how do you survive what cannot be survived? It is, how do you live fully honestly, without pretending the ending isn't coming, in the time you have? Odin's answer was, you seek wisdom. Thor's answer was, you fight for what you love. Freya's answer was, you choose what matters most and you live with the consequences. Tyr's answer was, you do what justice requires even when it costs you your hand. Tonight, in the quiet, what is your answer? I want to speak slowly now, to whoever is still listening. Somewhere in the mythology of the Norse people, in the long dark Scandinavian winters where these stories were first told around fires and longhouses while the wind came off the fjords, someone imagined this. The gods who knew they were going to die, who feasted anyway, who built anyway, who loved anyway, who showed up to the ending with everything they had, a spear that never missed, a hammer that always returned, an antler, a hand they were prepared to lose. And on the other side of the ending, the golden game pieces in the grass, the earth new and green, the waterfalls running over the new rocks, the fields already bearing grain that no one had planted. You are lying in the dark right now, in whatever city, at whatever hour, and you are carrying something, whatever it is that you carry, whatever ending you know is coming, whatever thing you cannot prevent, whatever you have been preparing for or refusing to prepare for or simply trying to get through one day at a time. The Norse gods would not tell you to pretend it isn't coming. They would not offer you the comfort of denial. That was not their style. They would tell you to feast, to fight, to place your hand in the wolf's mouth if that is what justice requires, to give your sword away for love if that is what love requires, and then show up to the battle with an antler, because showing up is what the moment requires. And they would tell you, because the mythology insists on this, that on the other side of even the largest ending there are golden game pieces in the grass, things that survive, things that continue, things that the old world loved that the new world finds lying there, still beautiful, still worth picking up. Tonight, you don't have to figure out which god you are. You don't have to know what your ending looks like or when it's coming. You only have to be here. In this breath, in this room, in this quiet. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of the knowing be there without demanding that you do anything about it tonight. The battle, if it's coming, will still be there in the morning. For now, like the gods in Valhalla between the battles, feast, rest. Let the fire be warm, and let the night hold you until morning. If this reached you tonight, leave a comment, just your city and the time. And if you want more nights like this one, subscribe. We're here every Monday and Thursday. Same quiet place, same honest voice. Good night, wherever you are.